All right. Hi, a very good morning, everybody. Let me just check if we're live or not. Again, I've been facing some technical difficulties, and today the stream is not really capturing my face. But nonetheless, we can begin with the class. See where it takes us. Just give me a moment. Yeah, we are live. Cool. Right. Today we're going to be continuing the trend that we began with yesterday, which is to practice some critical reasoning. Sorry, day before yesterday we began with critical reasoning, right? We discussed the different kind of questions that we can encounter when it comes to the critical reasoning portion, and we dug deep to figure out how arguments are structured, what is a premise, what is an assumption, what is a conclusion. Yesterday we practiced different kinds of questions. We mainly practiced strengthening, weakening, assumption, as well as inference questions yesterday, and we're going to continue that today as well, right? We're going to continue that today as well as we practice more and more questions pertaining to critical reasoning. But before we do that, allow me to give you a quick introduction about myself. I'm Prankur Arora. I'm essentially a trainer and a coach, and I've been doing this for a while. I'm a published author as well, uh, and I hold advanced certifications in facilitation. Facilitation is the methodology of teaching, training, and coaching, and I hold certifications in facilitation from Leadership Management International, which is perhaps the world's largest organization working in the domain of leadership, and I run the startup by the name of Thought Sutra. So, yeah, that's pretty much about me. Good morning, Sangeeta. These are the various subscription models that Unacademy follows. You can clearly see as the time period goes up, the cost of the subscription per month goes down dramatically. And if you use my name, Prankur, you'll get an extra 10% off on any of the subscriptions that you go for. Let's begin with the first question for the day, right? Okay, Sangeeta. So, this is an argument, right? This is the argument. This is the question. Read the question first, then go to the argument, and then hit me up on the chat with your answer. Which of the following conclusions can most properly be drawn from the information above? Right? So you have to essentially complete the argument and figure out which of these options fits in here as the conclusion. So the argument is that when a polygraph test is judged inconclusive, there is no reflection on the examinee. Rather, such a judgment means that the test has failed to show whether the examinee was truthful or untruthful. Nevertheless, employers will sometimes refuse to hire a job applicant because of an inconclusive polygraph test result. Right? So, The premise is essentially broken down into two components. Let me do that for you. Yeah. One is we have a conclusive result, right? We have a conclusive result. And the other is that the result is inconclusive, right? So when we have a conclusive result, we know whether a person is truthful or a person is a liar, right? These are the two results when we have a conclusive test. When we have when we have an inconclusive test, we don't know. We don't know whether the person lied or not, right? We don't know whether the person is speaking truth or whether the person is lying, right? So when we get an inconclusive test, ideally we should give the person a benefit of the doubt, right? But that does not happen. Why? Because they're saying nevertheless employers will sometimes refuse to hire a job applicant because of an inconclusive polygraph test, right? So when we get an inconclusive test, employers refuse to hire people, which is unfair, right? Which is kind of unfair. So let's look at all the options and see which of the following is making sense here. Most examinees with inconclusive polygraph test results are in fact untruthful. Now, when we get inconclusive results, we don't know whether the person is truthful or untruthful, right? So, this conclusion does not make sense because when we have an inconclusive result, we don't know whether they are untruthful or truthful. We know whether they are truthful or untruthful only when we get conclusive results, right? So, A does not make sense at all. Okay, C. C is the correct answer, Sangeeta. Well done. That an inconclusive test result is sometimes unfairly held against the examinee. Well done. Well done. Let's look at B. B says polygraph should not be used by employers. Why should it not be used? We don't know how many times we get an inconclusive or a conclusive test. Right? What if 90% of the times we are getting conclusive test results, only 10% of the times we are getting inconclusive. So at least in 90% of the cases, we are able to find out whether they are truthful or untruthful, right? So in that sense, it makes sense, right? So we need further information to conclude about B. D says a test indicating that an examinee is untruthful can sometimes be mistaken. If it is indicating untruthful or truthful, then it is not mistaken. It is an actual result. So D is also not making sense. Some employers have refused to consider when evaluating. Again, we don't know about this. There is no information in the passage about this, so we cannot conclude about E. C, as you pointed out, is the correct answer that when we have inconclusive results, it is unfairly held against the examinee. Let's look at the second question. Again, look at the question first and then look at the passage. This is the question and this is the passage. Oh, hi Karan. Okay, you're saying E. Let's look at it. Uh, the premise says wood smoke contains dangerous toxins that cause changes in human cells. All right, so we know wood smoke is dangerous. Second part of the premise is because wood smoke presents such a health risk, legislation is needed to regulate the use of open air fires and wood burning stoves. We have to basically strengthen this argument. So we have to support the argument. A says amount of toxins contained in wood smoke is much less than the amount contained in an equal volume of automobile exhaust. Are we drawing comparisons here? No, we are not. So A is irrelevant. B. Within the jurisdiction covered, most heating and cooking is done with oil or natural gas. Instead of strengthening, this is weakening. Right? So we eliminate option B as well. C. Smoke produced by coal burning stoves is significantly more toxic than smoke from wood burning stoves. But we are talking about wood burning stoves, right? We're talking about wood burning stove. We are not concerned whether coal burning से ज़्यादा toxicity होती है, right? So that argument is also irrelevant. Hi Asim. Hope my justification for B kind of made sense to you. D says no significant effect on air quality would result if open air fires were banned within the jury. This is also weakening. Instead of strengthening, this is weakening the argument. So, yes, Karan has gotten it right. E is the correct answer that in valleys where wood is used as primary fuel, the concentration of smoke results in poor air quality. Well done, Karan. Let's move on to the next question. Asim says A. Okay. So, yeah. Let's look at the question. The question says which of the following challenges indicates a weakness? So, we have to weaken the argument. What is the argument? When hypnotized subjects are told that they are deaf and are then asked whether they can hear the hypnotist, they reply no. Okay. So, one is when you have deaf, then they reply no, right? Some theorists try to explain this result by arguing that the cells of hypnotized subjects are dissociated into separate parts, and the part that is deaf is associated dissociated from the part that replies. So one is when you reply, you're not deaf, you reply properly, right? But when you're deaf, you reply with a no, right? So this is the dissociation between two parts. One part is not deaf, right? And the other part is deaf. The part that is deaf replies with a no, and the part that is not deaf replies properly, right? Why now we have to weaken the argument? And Asim says, A, why does the part that replies not answer yes? Exactly, this makes the maximum amount of sense. Well done, Asim. That if your part is replying, why does it reply with a no? Why can't it reply with a yes? Right? So how is it deaf? How is it deaf if it is actually replying with a no? Are you getting my point? Understand that the argument says when hypnotized subjects are told that they are deaf and are then asked whether they can hear the hypnotist, they reply no. How are they replying no? Why are they not replying with a yes? Replying no also means that they're hearing something and then responding, right? So, A truly weakens the argument. Well done, Asim. Let's look at the next question. So this is an argument construction question. Look at the question. The question says conclusion above would be more reasonably drawn if which of the following were inserted into the argument as an additional premise. So premise is essentially all the evidence, the information that is given to you already based on which you draw a conclusion. So they are saying कि अपने को एक और piece of information argument में डालना है ताकि हमारा conclusion stronger हो, right? So figure that out and as usual, hit me up on the chat with your answer and then we'll discuss it. Sorry. C. Okay, you think C. Alright. Let's look at the premise. The premise says even though most universities retain the royalties from faculty members' inventions, the faculty members retain royalties from books and articles they write. So when it's inventions, royalty goes to what do you call it? Universities, right? Now they say books and articles. The other category is books and articles. And when we're talking about books and articles, the royalty goes to um, faculty members. Right? This is Karan says D. All right. Therefore, Now they say, therefore, this is the conclusion. Therefore, faculty members should retain the royalties from educational computer software they develop. So we know for a fact that when we are talking about books and articles, royalty goes to faculty. When we're talking about inventions, royalty goes to university. Conclusion is faculty members के पास royalty आनी चाहिए from educational computer software. So essentially, if I think about it, these are the two classifications that we've made. If I think about it, for educational computer software ki royalty to come to faculty members, it has to fall in this category. So if a point out of these five tells me that educational computer software is more relatable to books and articles than to inventions, then I can understand as to why that royalty should come to faculty and not to the university. So let's look at all the options and follow the process of elimination. Option A: royalties from inventions are higher than royalties from educational software programs. Now, this is talking about inventions, this is talking about software programs, but it is not talking about books and articles, right? We have to basically relate educational software to books and articles for that classification to happen. So we eliminate option A. Option B, option B says faculty members are more likely to produce educational programs than inventions. Again, it is not talking about books. We want a point about books as well. So we eliminate point B. C says inventions bring more prestige to universities than do books and articles. Now it is comparing inventions to books and articles, but it is not comparing educational computer software. How do I conclude about educational computer software if I'm not talking about it and I'm only talking about inventions and books? Right? So that is why I'll eliminate option C. D says in the experience of most universities, software programs are more marketable than our books and articles. Again, if software are more marketable, then what? It is not bringing in that classification between inventions and books, and it is not drawing a relatability factor with educational program. या तो तुम compare books और invention को करो and tell me that educational software program is more relatable to books, right? So, yes, E should be the answer, because, in terms of the criteria used to reward royalties or award royalties, educational programs are more nearly comparable to books and articles than to inventions. Right? That is why that royalty should come to faculty. Understand that our conclusion is always based on the premise, it cannot be based on outside information. Right? So the premise should make that classification, make that distinction between inventions and books, and should tell us as to why the software is closer to books than to inventions. And E does that for me perfectly. That is why E is the answer. Let's look at the next question. Sir, comparison is always eliminated. See, comparison आप तब eliminate करते हो जब वो out of scope of the argument होता है. If the comparison is between the elements that are talked about in the premise, then why will you eliminate it? You eliminate comparison only when it is out of scope of the argument. It is comparing one element to something that is not even talked about in the argument. That is when you eliminate comparisons. Okay, B is what you say the answer is. All right, let's look at the premise. The premise is computer industries estimate that it loses millions when users illegally copy programs without paying for them is greatly exaggerated. Most of the illegal copying is done by people with no serious interest in the program. Okay, so uh, estimation is that we use millions of dollars because people copy our programs and they don't pay for them. So we lose money. And then there is the idea that most of the illegal copying is done by people with no interest in the program. So people who are copying, they have no interest to the program. Thus the loss is quite small, because so you have to rationalize as to why it cannot be millions of dollars. The loss has to be very small, because I agree, most people who illegally buy the programs or who illegally copy the programs would not buy them, would not purchase them, even if purchasing them were the only way to obtain them, because they're not interested in it at all. So B is the correct answer. Well done. Let's look at the next question now. Okay, so the question is, which of the following, if true, most seriously calls into question? Calls into question matlab weakens the explanation above. So this is the argument and you have to call it into question, which means you have to weaken it. See, all right. Let's understand this. Uh, in the last decade, there has been a significant decrease in coffee consumption. So, coffee consumption has gone down. Coffee consumption has gone down. During the same time, there has been increasing publicity about long-term effects. Sorry. At the same time, there has been increasing publicity about long-term effects on health of the caffeine in coffee. So negative PR. I'll write that down. Negative PR about coffee. Okay, I think it's buffering for some reason. Let me check if the stream's working fine. And why is there? All right. So sorry, as I was saying, there are two things that have been given to us in premise. One is that there's decrease in coffee consumption, and the other is negative PR about coffee. The increase in negative PR about coffee. At the same time, they are saying that the decrease in coffee consumption must have been caused by consumers' awareness because आपका PR बढ़ा है, तो naturally coffee consumption decrease हो जानी चाहिए because of the negative publicity, right? So now you have to weaken this. You have to call it into question. How do we do that? Option A says on average people consume 30% less coffee today than they did 10 years ago. This is what they are saying in the premise. So this does not weaken the argument at all. We eliminate option A. Option B, which Karan thinks is the answer, heavy coffee drinkers may have mild withdrawal symptoms such as headaches for a day or so after decreasing their coffee consumption. See, withdrawal symptoms because of decrease in consumption is another topic altogether, right? It is not telling me as to why the consumption went down. Withdrawal symptoms happen after your consumption is decreasing, but we have to figure out why the consumption is decreasing in the first place, right? So we eliminate option B. Option C says sales of specialty types of coffee have held steady as sales of regular brands have declined. Again, Asim, understand that even if specialty types of coffee have held steady while sales of regular brands have declined, that does not give me a reason behind decrease in coffee consumption, right? We have to figure out a reason for decrease, right? A reason that tells me that the decrease is not because of consumer awareness, it is because of something else, right? So that is what we have to figure out. D says consumption of fruit juice and caffeine free herbal tea has increased over the past decade. See, I can drink coffee and drink juice at the same time. Not at the same time in the sense, in the same time period. For example, I wake up in the morning and I take a herbal juice or a fruit juice, but after my breakfast, I take a cup of coffee. That can happen, right? So you can consume fruit juices or herbal teas and coffees simultaneously, right? So that is why I eliminate option D as well. E makes the maximum amount of sense to me that prices increased steadily in the past decade because of severe frost in the coffee growing nations. So if you're not harvesting coffee, right, आपका सप्लाई कम हो रहा है, बिकॉज आपका सप्लाई कम हो रहा है तो आपका प्राइस बढ़ रहा है, और बिकॉज आपका प्राइस बढ़ रहा है आपका डिमांड कम हो रहा है. दिस इज सिंपल इकोनॉमिक्स. Yes, calls into question means weaken the argument, Karan. Right? So understand E makes the maximum amount of sense. Why? Because if your supply of coffee goes down, if your supply of coffee goes down, your prices go up. And whenever prices go up, your demand always naturally goes down. Right? Understand this very simple economics concept that when supply decreases, your prices go up, and because your prices go up, your demand decreases, and vice versa, that when your supply is really huge, your prices go down and your demand increase, right? So these are two basic economic concepts, please make note of them, right? Hope you've understood this question. Let's move on to the next one. D. All right. Which of the following, if true, most seriously weakens the argument? Right. So you had to weaken the argument again. What is the premise? Premise is that a drug that is highly effective in treating infection is present at present can only be obtained from bark of the Ibora, a tree that is very rare. Okay, Karan says A or E. All right. So we know Ibora is very rare, right? और उसी से हमारा drug बन रहा है. That is the premise. It takes the bark of 5,000 trees to make 1 kg of the drug. So 5,000 trees have to be cut down for this drug to come into existence. It follows, therefore, now this is the conclusion, right? You have to weaken it. Therefore, that continued production must inevitably need to Ibora's extinction, right? So you are saying that if we continue to produce this drug, this tree will become extinct. We have to weaken the argument. Option A is that the drug made from is dispensed to doctors from a central authority. How does this help, Karan? If the drug is dispensed to doctors from a central authority, this does not tell me anything about Ebora's extinction, right? We have to weaken the argument of Ebora's extinction, so A is irrelevant. B. Drug made from Ebora bark is expensive to produce. Money is not an issue in the argument. Money is not being discussed at all. So we eliminate option B. Why? Because money is out of scope of the argument. C says the leaves of the Ebora are used in a number of medical products. Leaves of Ebora are used in a number of medical products. Again, that means that the drug is important, right? And if you continually produce it, it will become extinct. And not telling me anything about extinction, so I eliminate option C. D says Ebora can be propagated from cuttings and grown under cultivation. Makes a lot of sense. I think Asim again got this right. Why? Because if you can grow it, if you can cultivate the tree, that means the tree will never become extinct because you will continuously cultivate it so that you can keep on producing the drug. Are you getting my point? If it can be cultivated, right? If it can be propagated from the cuttings, then that means you can continuously keep on growing the tree and making the drug, right? So D weakens the argument because it calls into question the idea of Ebora's extinction. Ebora generally grows in largely inaccessible places. Understand, Karan, this instead of weakening the argument, it strengthens the argument. Instead of weakening it, it is strengthening it. Why? Because if it is present in inaccessible places, that means it will easily become extinct, right? Because you're going to those places to make this drug, right? And these places are largely inaccessible. That means that nobody will be able to cultivate the tree at all. So that is why E, instead of weakening the argument, it strengthens the argument to a certain extent. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Question is, which of the following, if true, would most strongly support the position above? So you have to strengthen the argument. You have to strengthen it. All right, let's discuss this. A or B is what Karan says. All right. Uh, okay. So, what is the premise? The premise is that many breakfast cereals are fortified with vitamin supplements, and some of these cereals provide 100% of the recommended daily requirement of vitamins. Okay. So, fortified cereals, they provide 100% of the daily requirement. Nevertheless, now this is the conclusion, this is where the argument shifts. Nevertheless, a well balanced breakfast, including a variety of foods, is a better source of vitamins than fortified breakfast cereals alone, right? So, nevertheless, they are saying we should have a well balanced breakfast because they are a better source of vitamins. How are they a better source of vitamins is what will support the argument. Why? Because we already know that these cereals provide 100% of the vitamin requirement, daily vitamin requirement. It is 100% fulfilled by the cereals, but still we are saying कि नहीं, हमें well balanced breakfast लेना चाहिए, हमें खाली cereals नहीं खाने चाहिए. ऐसा क्यों है? Option A, in many foods, the natural combination of vitamins with other nutrients make those vitamins more usable by the body than are vitamins added in vitamin supplements. Perfect amount of sense, Karan. Well done. A is the answer. Right? You were confused between B though. B says people who regularly eat fortified cereals fortified with vitamins sometimes neglect to eat the foods in which the vitamins occur naturally. Does not matter. Why? Because if they're eating cereals, they are getting 100% of the requirement. But option A tells me as to why a well balanced diet is better, because absorption of vitamins is better if you're taking this a well balanced diet, right? So A in that sense is a better option than B, and that is why we'll go with option A. Okay. So with this, I'll wrap up the class today, and I'll see you guys tomorrow again at 10 o'clock in the morning. Do tune in, and we'll continue where we left off today. Right? Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you again.